Today, we're going to show you how to do a DSG service on a DL501 equipped Audi. Behind me is my C7 S6. The S6 has a 4-liter twin-turbo V8 mated to a 7-speed DSG transmission. DSG stands for direct shift gearbox, and it's a type of dual clutch transmission. Dual clutches are cool because as you shift gears, it'll actually alternate between clutches, which effectively gives you a lightning fast shift that's silky smooth. Audi recommends changing your DSG fluid at 35,000 miles and then 40,000 mile intervals after that. While we're under there, we're also going to service the rear sport diff, and we're going to wrap it all up with a clutch adaptation using VCDS. We offer a complete kit to service your DSG. This kit includes a DSG filter, a new oil pan gasket, a DSG cooler filter, 15 T30 Torx screws, O-rings, an OEM fill plug, an ECS magnetic drain plug with a new crush washer, and 7 liters of liquid moly dual clutch gear oil. A second option swaps out the liquid moly oil for OEM oil, and a third option gives you no oil, just in case you already have some sitting on the shelf. As far as the sport diff goes, we have OE gear oil and 2 ECS stainless steel magnetic plugs. As far as the tools required for the job, we have a whole slew of Schwaben sets. We have our Schwaben triple square sockets, we have our quarter drive sockets, we have our Torx sockets, our hex sockets, we have a 3/8 ratchet, we have a flathead screwdriver, a quarter drive torque wrench, and our Schwaben suction fill pump. Make sure you have plenty of shop towels and rubber gloves because it is an oil change job, you're gonna make a mess. So with that being said, let's get to work. It's important that your car is level for this service. You can use 4 jack stands, or since we're in the shop, we're gonna use our lift. Make sure you safely lift it. This car's already been safety checked, so we're ready to go up in the air, pull the belly pans off. First step is pulling off the belly pans. In this case, I need a flat blade screwdriver, an M10 triple square, and a T30 Torx. It's gonna be a little different for B8, S4s, S5s, and whatnot, but for C7 specifically, that's what you need. We're just gonna loosen all of these real quick, and we can pull them out by hand. Next step is to break all the cross brace bolts free. Got an 18 mil socket to do so. Jesus. If you have a 1/2-inch drive impact, this would be a great place to utilize that. So right here is the fill plug. You want to crack that first before you drain the DSG to ensure that you can get it out and you can actually put fluid back in. If you drain it first, you might not be able to get the fill plug off, and that would mean you would have no fluid in your transmission and you can't drive it anywhere. Next step is to crack the drain plug. Make sure you're ready to collect oil. It's about to get messy. If you don't want to wait for like 3 hours for your oil to drain, make sure you pull out the fill plug. So next I'm going to break loose all these pan bolts. I'm going to leave 2 in place so the pan stays up and in place. When we're ready, we'll pull those last 2, get the drain pan back underneath, and drop the whole oil pan. So since there's 15 fasteners to remove, I'm going to use my 1/4-inch impact, blast these out real fast. Support it with one hand. Drop the pan away. Next step is to remove the DSG filter. This should just slide right out. So next we're going to pull off the oil cooler filter housing. This requires a 17 mil socket, about a 3-inch extension, a swivel, and a 3/8 drive ratchet to make it easy. Here they are out of the car. Got the filter, housing itself. We're going to need to replace the O-ring on the housing that's provided in our kit. Going to use a small 90-degree pick, pop the O-ring off, and we'll grab the new one, put it right into its gland. Good to go. We're going to replace the oil pan gasket. You got to kind of pry it off with a flat blade screwdriver. Also clean out the inside. There's 2 magnets on either side of the pan. Make sure you clean all the particulates off of that. While you're cleaning the pan, you're able to pop out the magnets, clean them up real good. Just simply put them right back in place. So the next step with your pan is to pull off the old gasket. I've already pried off half of it here. Use a flat blade screwdriver or a chisel and just gently pull up. There's a couple little posts around the perimeter that hold it in place, like so. Just be extra careful when you're pulling those up. Now sometimes this black seal can leave some deposits on the pan. You want to make sure all that's cleaned off before putting your new gasket on. Next, we're going to apply our new gasket to our oil pan. Make sure you line the dowels up, push them down into their holes, and we are good to go for reassembly. Next step is to get the filter in and twist the housing on, and we'll torque this to spec. So on C7s, you might have to get the housing up into position and kind of wedge it in there if you don't want to remove any of the cooler components. Then you can put your filter in. Then just gently slide your housing over the filter. We're going to start the threads. We're not going to tighten this all the way. Before the housing goes on, make sure you lubricate the O-ring. Once it's fully seated, you're going to torque it to 8 Newton meters. You're going to have one little O-ring in the kit. Lubricate it and then put it right on top, the X on top of the DSG filter. Now we're going to put the filter up in place. Hopefully it doesn't fall by the time we go get the pan. So we're going to torque all the pan bolts to 12 Newton meters. I also have a paint pen. Since we have 15 to do, we need to alternate back and forth. There's no specific order on this from Audi. Just alternate from side to side until you complete all 15. I'm going to mark them with my paint pen, so I make sure I get every single one. Lastly, we have our ECS magnetic drain plug and a new crush washer. Thread that into the bottom of the pan. And this gets torqued to 45 Newton meters. Oil pan's on, drain plug's torqued, and the oil cooler filter housing is torqued to spec. We're done, we're ready to fill the DSG, but before we do that, we're gonna move on to the rear sport diff, drain, fill, and then we'll go back to the DSG and fill this up. So this is the side with ATF that fills the solenoids. This is a lifetime oil from Audi, which means it should be replaced at 100,000 miles. We're not going to touch this yet, but just make sure you do the right side, you do the actual gear oil instead of the ATF. This requires a more in-depth process for bleeding the system, and we're not going to get to that in this DIY. First thing we're going to do is crack the fill plug to ensure that we can fill it up. We want to make sure we can get that off before we drain it to ensure if we strip this out, we still have fluid in the diff, we can drive the car. We're using a 5mm hex socket on both of these. About to get stinky. Now we're going to put our new ECS stainless steel magnetic drain plug in. Just going to get it hand tight for now. This comes with a new copper crush washer. This specific diff takes 0.9 liters. We put about 1 liter in and 0.1 dripped out. We're just gonna let it drip for a little longer, then we're gonna put the fill plug in. We should be good to go back here. Give yourself one last cleanup, and we can move on to filling the DSG. Now it's time to fill the DSG with gear oil. We're gonna fill it with our liquid moly dual clutch gear oil here. If you are just doing a fill, it takes anywhere between 5 and 5.5 liters. If you have a new transmission that's never been filled, it could take up to 7, which is why we include 7 in our kit. You're gonna have to repeat this until DSG fluid starts coming out of the fill hole. Once it comes out of the fill hole, we'll start with the next step to bleed the system. Yep. Okay. So now it's coming out of the fill hole. We're ready to bleed the system. Gonna let it drip. Gonna put the plug in, just hand tight. And then we'll actually bring the car down, start it, go through the gears. What that's gonna do is it's gonna allow the filters to bleed. Then we'll get it back up in the air, fill it again, and we'll go through the rest of the filling sequence. Now that the plug's in, we're gonna tighten it a little bit with the wrench, not torquing it to spec. We'll drop the car down, turn it on, get it through the gears, start bleeding. Now we're gonna start it, leave it in each gear position for about 10 to 15 seconds. Back in park, we'll turn it off. That should be long enough for the filters to bleed. Now we're going to turn the car off. We don't want the trans to get too hot. That's for the next cadence. Right now we're going to get it back up in the air, fill it again until it starts coming out the fill hole. Then we got to get VCDS out, monitor trans temps, get it up to temp, and check one last time. We've completed the second fill process. It's currently dripping. I'm gonna wait till it's done dripping, put the drain plug back in, and then we have to turn the car on, get it up to a specific temperature, which we'll go over later, let it idle, come back down here, check it one last time, then the DSG service is complete. So now we're gonna start the final fill process. This requires bringing the transmission up to temperature. You need to bring it up to at least 30 degrees Celsius. We're gonna shoot for 40 degrees Celsius as that's usual operating temp, and no more than 50 degrees Celsius to complete this final fill. So we're gonna open up VCDS on our laptop. Car needs to be keyed on to look at the control modules. We're gonna go to the option select control module. It's gonna load up all of our modules. Next thing we're gonna select is module number 2, auto trans. Allow that to load. Then we're gonna go to advanced measuring values. That's going to bring up one more window where we can actually search. So we're going to type in trans, and the value we want to display is transmission fluid temperature. Click that checkbox and it will show up on your main screen over here on the left. Right now we're at 28 degrees Celsius, so we're going to have to let the car heat up a little more, and then we can perform the final fill.
With the transmission at operating temperature, turn the car off and remove the fill plug. Oil should drain out of the fill plug due to expansion. In the rare circumstance that it's not dripping, fill until it does. Wait for the oil to stop dripping, install the fill plug, and torque to 45 Newton meters.
Now that we're done filling the transmission, we're ready to do the clutch adaptation. You got to make sure your transmission is between 40 degrees and 60 degrees Celsius to complete this. Also, make sure your TCU is free of fault codes. So we're going to pull out VCDS to complete this job. So first thing we're going to do is bring up VCDS and go to select control module. We're going to go to control module 2, auto trans. Then we're going to go to basic settings. Now we're going to go to the top drop down menu, and you need to select erase counter for start and stop process. Once that's selected, hit go. It should say running, not running. Once it says not running, you can click stop. Now we're going to start the car, and with it left in park and running, we're going to go back into basic settings. We're going to select clutch valve calibration and then hit go. Your car is going to start revving up on its own. It's normal, just let the process go. And once the car comes back down from a high idle, it's usually going to complete itself and it's going to say finished correctly. Once it says finished correctly, you can move on to the next step. Hit done, go back. Now open up basic settings again. And we're going to select distance sensor calibration. Hit go. Your transmission is going to start making some noises during this adaptation. That's completely normal. Once that says finish correctly, you can hit stop, done, and go back. We have 2 more steps that we have to complete. Go ahead and turn the car off, but leave it keyed on. So now for the final 2 steps, we're going to have the car keyed on. We're going to go back into basic settings, go to our drop-down window, and select Reset Start Point Adaptation to the factory setting. Hit go. It should say finish correctly. We're not going to back out of basic settings yet. We're actually just going to hit stop. We're going to start the car. We're going to wait for the Audi beeps to go away. And then with the car on, go back to our drop-down. We're going to select Clutch Engagement Point Adaptation. Hit go. It should tell you it's running and take a couple seconds. Once completed, it will say finished correctly. We can now hit stop, done, go back. If you have trouble with these last 2 steps, make sure you try keying off the car, letting it reset for 10 seconds, backing out of the controller, and then starting again. It will show you error codes every now and again, so really try and reset, go back to the original screen for VAGCOM, start the controller back up, key it on, do the first step, start the car, do the final step until it's complete. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to bring up our advanced measuring values. We're going to search clutch, and there's going to be 2 values that we want to show. The 2 values are adaptation status of the engagement point 1 and adaptation status of the engagement point 2. So the next thing you want to do is you're going to have to drive your car around and allow the clutches to learn their new grab point. If you want, you could leave VAGCOM open in your car and you can display these advanced measuring values. After about an hour and a half to 2 hours of driving, it'll say the clutches are fully adapted. If not, you could just drive around for 2 hours until they adapt properly. One good tip for this is drive around in normal drive mode and then drive around in sport mode, because you want to be able to be driving in the even gears to set one of the clutches and the odd gears to set the other clutch. Alright guys, that wraps up our DIY on how to service your DL501 transmission. If you have any questions specifically on the clutch adaptation, we'll make sure to do a full write-up in the description below. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for more great DIY videos, and until next time.